The silence of space was broken by the sudden roar of engines, twin engines thrumming with power as the Tarkari's raiding fleet neared their target. The once peaceful human colony of Vulture Prime sat nestled in the outer rim of the Arcturus system, a world that had never seen war. Its golden fields of crops and peaceful settlements were the pride of humanity's expansion into the stars. They had thought themselves beyond the reach of galactic predators, but they were wrong. Captain Lucius Ward stared at the display screen aboard Pride of Earth, the only surviving warship from humanity's first expansion into space. His eyes, hardened by years of duty, flicked over the growing number of Tarkari ships on his tactical readout. The reptilian invaders, with their sleek, menacing craft and aggressive tactics, were rapidly closing in on the human colony. His ship's sensors picked up the telltale signs of a massive fleet: Tarkari dreadnoughts, attack cruisers, and dropships, all advancing with terrifying speed. "Captain, they're here," Lieutenant Sophie Dunn's voice crackled through the comm. "The Tarkari are dropping out of hyperspace just beyond the atmosphere." Ward's hands clenched the armrests of his command chair. He could hear the distant hum of Pride of Earth's engines as they strained to prepare for battle. They were outgunned, outnumbered, and running low on supplies after a long stretch of isolation. The Tarkari had made no secret of their intentions. They'd been probing human space for weeks, testing defenses, gathering intel. Now they were here to finish what they started: wipe out humanity's foothold in the stars. "We got to buy time for the evacuation," Ward said, his voice hard with resolve. "Get us into firing range of those cruisers. We'll hit them with everything we've got." The ship's bridge crew moved quickly, inputting commands into the battle consoles. Pride of Earth wasn't a warship in the modern sense. Its technology was old, predating humanity's rise as an intergalactic power. But it had been designed for endurance, a vessel that could weather storms and push through impossible odds. Unfortunately, today, that might not be enough. "Captain, our long-range weapons are functional," said Dunn, her voice tight with the knowledge of their predicament. "But our main cannon systems are offline. We'll have to rely on the secondary batteries." "Understood," Ward replied, his mind already racing through options. It was a losing battle, but humanity had always been good at defying the odds. "Get the secondary guns ready. We'll hold them off until the last moment." A heavy vibration shuddered through the hull as the first wave of Tarkari fire splashed across the Pride of Earth's shields. The ship groaned under the pressure, but the shields held, barely. Ward's stomach twisted. The Tarkari were known for their brutal tactics, and they didn't hesitate. The warships surrounding the human colony began deploying dropships, their sleek, elongated forms descending like deadly vultures onto the surface of Vulture Prime. The first explosions rang out, the colony's defenses shattering in an instant. "Damage reports coming in, Captain," Dunn called. "Shields at 30% and falling. We're taking hits to the aft engines." "Don't let up," Ward barked. "Give them everything you've got. Fire at will." The ship's secondary guns roared to life, unleashing a hailstorm of kinetic energy and energy blasts into the lead Tarkari ships. But the alien vessels were relentless, their dark hulls absorbing the fire with minimal damage. The Tarkari were professionals, tactical geniuses in space combat. They had done this before, countless times, on countless worlds. They knew how to break an enemy. Ward cursed under his breath. The colony was already doomed. The human ships had always been designed for defense, for peaceful exploration. They had never been meant to face down an invasion of this scale, and yet there was no choice but to fight. As the dropships landed and Tarkari forces stormed the surface, the humans launched their last defense. The civilian fleet, old freighters and shuttles with makeshift weapons, began to evacuate the population. Children, families, soldiers, all crowding into the ships, fleeing the wrath of the Tarkari invasion. "Evacuation in progress," Dunn reported, her voice laced with strain. "But there's no way we can outrun them. We need reinforcements, Captain." Ward's eyes narrowed. He knew there was no help coming. not for hours, perhaps days. And even then, the human fleet was scattered across the galaxy, far away from this sector. The Tarkari didn't care. They were here to conquer, not to negotiate. Humanity's position was perilous, but they would fight for every inch. Suddenly, a shrill alarm cut through the noise of the battle. A new signal blinked on the display. An encrypted distress call, barely detectable, coming from the heart of the Tarkari formation. Ward's heart skipped a beat. He knew that signal. It was a message from a place long thought abandoned, a place that hadn't been heard from in years. "Get me a location on that signal," Ward ordered, gripping the console. As the coordinates flashed on the screen, a realization hit him with the force of a meteor. There was one thing that Tarkari hadn't counted on. Humanity had always been underestimated. And now it was time for them to learn just how wrong they were. The pride of Earth shuddered again as another barrage of Tarkari fire slammed into its already battered hull. Captain Lucius Ward could feel the ship's frame groan, the once proud vessel buckling under the relentless assault. The enemy was relentless, their assault unstoppable. The Tarkari ships were everywhere, swarming like locusts, tearing apart human defenses piece by piece. Ward's gaze fixed on the small blinking dot on his console, the encrypted distress signal that had suddenly appeared from deep space. The message was a mystery, but it was humanity's last hope. The signal was old, barely readable, but there was no mistaking it. Ward's heart pounded in his chest as he ran the code through the ship's systems. The transmission wasn't just random static. It was a direct transmission from a hidden outpost on the far side of the galaxy, an outpost humanity had used years ago, long before the Tarkari ever set foot in human space. There was only one possible source for this distress signal, and Ward's mind raced. "Lieutenant Dunn," he called sharply, "get me a map of the Arcturus system. I need a route to that location. Fast." Dunn's fingers flew across the console, tapping furiously. "Captain, it's in the opposite direction of Earth. It's a long shot, but there's a chance we could get there before the Tarkari finish their job." Ward nodded, gripping the armrests of his chair. Time was running out. Vulture Prime was already lost. The dropships were on the ground, already engaging in brutal combat with the human defenders. Hundreds, if not thousands, of civilians were still on the planet's surface, trying to escape the invasion. But the message, it was their lifeline, the thread of hope humanity so desperately needed. "Set a course for the outpost," Ward ordered. "Prepare to jump to warp speed. We're going in blind." "Captain, the fleet." Dunn hesitated. "We'll be leaving the colony completely exposed." "Do it. Now." The urgency in Ward's voice left no room for argument. The Tarkari were overwhelming, and the civilian ships were vulnerable. But if there was any chance at all of reinforcements, humanity had to take it. The pride of Earth would have to be the decoy, drawing attention away from the evacuation. As the ship turned and engaged its engines, the faint light of the stars stretched and elongated in the viewport, a blurry ribbon of white light. They shot into the void, faster than the speed of light, the hum of the warp engines filling the bridge with a steady, comforting pulse. The Tarkari were too preoccupied with Vulture Prime to pursue them. Yet, Ward stared out at the stars, his mind racing. His thoughts briefly flashed to Earth, to the millions of people back home. They had no idea what was happening out here in the farthest reaches of human space. Would they even be able to stop the Tarkari invasion if they couldn't get reinforcements in time? Would humanity's legacy in the stars end in ashes, swallowed by the aggressive tide of a galactic predator? The ship jolted again, a violent lurch that threw the crew off balance. It was only for a split second, but the suddenness of it brought Ward back to the present. His eyes darted to the communications officer, who was frantically typing on his console. "Sir, we're picking up a signal. From Earth." Ward's pulse quickened. "Patch it through." The comm screen flickered and hummed before a crackling voice filled the room. "This is Admiral Henry Calloway, command of the human fleet. Prepare for emergency evacuation. Ward's heart skipped a beat. The human fleet, the fleet that had been thought lost, abandoned, and nothing more than a legend, was real. It existed. Calloway's voice continued. We've been aware of the Tarkari for some time. We've been waiting for the right moment to strike back, to give humanity its first true chance to survive in this galaxy. You have done more than we could have hoped for in holding off the invaders. Now we'll do our part. Ward exhaled sharply, fighting to keep his composure. Admiral, we're currently en route to an old outpost. It could be the key to turning this war around. We need to link up with your forces immediately. Understood. I'll have a fleet rendezvous with you at the coordinates you transmit. The Tarkari may think they've won, but they've made a grave mistake underestimating humanity. We'll meet you there. The message cut off abruptly, and Ward's mind was alight with disbelief. The fleet was real. They were coming. But would they arrive in time? How much damage would be done to the colony before that? The time between now and their rendezvous seemed endless. Lieutenant, get me a direct line to the evacuation fleet, Ward ordered, his voice steady despite the chaos in his mind. Tell them to hold course. We're not abandoning them. The crew quickly relayed the message, the tension on the bridge thickening as the Pride of Earth shot through the void. The silence of space, broken only by the growling hum of the engines and the haunting memory of the colony they had left behind. Captain, Dunn called softly, we'll make it. We have to. Ward didn't answer immediately. He couldn't afford to lie to his crew. There were too many variables, too many unknowns. But deep down, something gnawed at him, a flicker of something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. And for the first time in days, Ward allowed himself to believe it. Hold course, he ordered, and prepare for what comes next. The stars stretched into a blur of light as the Pride of Earth accelerated through the void, its engines screaming under the strain. Every crew member on the bridge was silent, their eyes fixed on the instruments before them. The hum of the warp drive was the only sound that filled the tense air. Captain Lucius Ward's fingers rested lightly on the armrests of his chair, his knuckles white. He couldn't help but glance up at the stars occasionally, the cold silence of space pressing in on him. Behind them, Vulture Prime burned. The invasion had been swift and brutal. There was no denying it. The Tarkari had come in with overwhelming force. The people of the colony were running out of time. Even now, with the civilian ships fleeing the surface, there was no guarantee they would escape the Tarkari's wrath. It wasn't just a matter of survival anymore. Humanity's future was hanging in the balance. We're nearing the coordinates, Lieutenant Sophie Dunn called from her station, breaking the stillness. Ward's eyes narrowed as he turned toward her. What's the status of the fleet, Lieutenant? Dunn hesitated, her fingers a blur over the controls. There's still no sign of any ships, or not yet. Ward's jaw tightened. It had been hours since they first received Admiral Calloway's message. The Admiral had promised reinforcements, but without solid confirmation, he couldn't afford to assume they were on their way. Everything was riding on that rendezvous, and the Tarkari were still out there, relentless and unyielding. The fleet will come, Ward muttered, more to himself than anyone else. The Pride of Earth continued to plow through the empty reaches of space. No longer were they in the quiet, peaceful outskirts of human space. Now they were deep within contested territory. Every light flicker, every strange sound from the hull, made the tension in the air thicker. Ward clenched his jaw and refocused on the task at hand. They were nearing the outpost, the key to humanity's salvation, or perhaps its demise. Suddenly, the bridge lights flickered. Status, Ward barked. Something's off, Captain, Dunn replied, her voice sharp. I'm picking up a signal. It's not ours. I don't know what it is, but it's coming from the location we're heading toward. Can you triangulate it? Ward asked, moving forward. I'll try, but it's faint. It's almost as if it's being transmitted from within the outpost itself. It's erratic, she answered, her brow furrowing as she worked the controls. Ward's pulse quickened. The outpost was supposed to be abandoned, a skeleton station built during humanity's early exploration days. Decades old, barely maintained, and long forgotten by most of humanity. It wasn't supposed to be operational, let alone sending out distress signals. "Keep trying, Lieutenant," Ward ordered, his tone now steely. The thought of the station being compromised by Tsarkari agents was too much to entertain, but he couldn't afford to ignore it. The fleet might be waiting for them there, but it might also be a trap. A tense silence settled over the bridge as the crew continued to work. Then, as though answering Ward's unspoken fears, the comms officer spoke up. "Captain, I'm getting another signal. It's a broadcast from the outpost itself. It's encrypted, but it's definitely human." Ward straightened in his chair. "Patch it through." A sharp crackle filled the air before a gruff voice came through the speakers. "This is Admiral Henry Calloway, command of the human fleet. We've been waiting for you. We've also been waiting for the Tsarkari." Ward's heart skipped a beat. The voice was unmistakable. Calloway, the man who had been the stuff of legends, the one figure humanity had placed its faith in. The commander of the fleet that had been hidden away for years, waiting for the right moment to strike back. And now that moment had arrived. The screen flickered to life, and Ward could see Calloway's face for the first time in years. He was older, with streaks of silver in his hair and deep lines etched into his face, but there was a fierceness in his eyes that hadn't dimmed, a quiet resolve. "Captain Ward, we have a lot to discuss," Calloway said, his voice low but commanding. "But right now, we need you to listen. We're not just a fleet. What we've built here is a whole new military force. And the Tsarkari, they've underestimated us, underestimated you." Ward felt a surge of relief mixed with awe. He had wondered for so long if the rumors about the human fleet were true, and now here they were, hidden, silent, and waiting for the moment to strike. A fleet capable of saving humanity from extinction. "The Tsarkari have advanced technologies and brutal tactics, but so do we," Calloway continued. "Our fleet is more than a collection of ships. It's a new way of fighting, Captain, a way that turns their strengths into weaknesses." Ward leaned forward. "What do you need from us, Admiral?" Calloway's face hardened. "We need you to hold the line for just a little longer. We need your knowledge of their tactics, your leadership. Your crew is the last link between the galaxy's understanding of the Tsarkari and our survival. Help us, and we'll give humanity the power to turn the tide." Ward nodded slowly. "We'll hold the line, Admiral. You have my word." The line went dead, and Ward let out a slow breath. The fleet had arrived. The true battle for humanity's survival was only beginning. The pride of Earth may have been battered and broken, but it was far from finished. With the reinforcements on their way, humanity was finally going to fight back. The war was no longer just about survival. It was about victory. The pride of Earth emerged from the void, the cold, empty expanse of space, now filled with the glaring lights of a fleet beyond imagination. At first, it was only a few distant silhouettes, ghostly shapes in the darkness. But as Ward's ship neared the outpost coordinates, the shadows began to take form. Ships. Massive, angular, and sleek, their hulls gleaming with advanced technology, streaked with the insignias of the human fleet. Captain Lucius Ward's breath caught in his throat as he saw the full scope of what Admiral Calloway had built. It was beyond anything he had ever imagined. A fleet like no other. Cruisers, dreadnoughts, assault ships. Tens of thousands of them, arrayed in perfect formation, ready for war. And in the center, towering over the rest, was the flagship Titan's Vengeance. Its dark metallic hull shimmered with cold purpose, its enormous weapons arrays bristling with power. Ward's voice was barely a whisper. "By God, they've really done it." "Captain," Lieutenant Dunn's voice broke through his awe. "I'm detecting Tsarkari vessels closing in on our position. They've followed us here." Ward's heart skipped a beat as the sensors lit up. The Tsarkari hadn't wasted any time. They had anticipated the arrival of reinforcements, And now they were here, ready to crush humanity's last stand. "They've made a mistake," Ward said, his voice firm. "Contact the fleet. We'll hit them hard." The comms officer was quick to relay the order. Within moments, a message flashed up on the screen from Admiral Calloway. "Captain Ward, we've received your position. We're locking in the coordinates. Prepare for the first strike." A surge of adrenaline ran through Ward. For the first time in weeks, he felt the weight of his responsibility lift. Reinforcements had arrived, not just reinforcements, but a force capable of turning the tide. The humans had fought bravely to hold their ground, but now they had something far more powerful on their side. The Tarkari were about to learn just how wrong they had been. "Initiate the assault," Calloway's voice echoed through the comms. "We don't have time to waste. Bring the fight to them." The battle was about to begin. As the Pride of Earth and the human fleet powered toward the Tarkari armada, Ward's eyes flicked across the sensor readouts. The Tarkari were already making their move, dreadnoughts and assault cruisers moving into attack formation, their weapons primed. There was no turning back now. The battle would decide the fate of humanity. Ward's hand moved to the controls. "All hands, prepare for combat. Engage enemy forces." With a roar that reverberated through the ship, Pride of Earth's engines flared to life. The fleet surged forward, the human ships cutting through space with precision and speed. The first wave of Tarkari fire lit up the darkened expanse as enemy warships launched a barrage of energy blasts. The human fleet responded in kind, plasma cannons and mass driver weapons firing in unison, their shots striking the incoming enemy ships with deadly accuracy. "Shields holding," Dunn called. "We're taking hits, but they're holding strong, Captain." Ward barely heard her. His focus was locked on the Tarkari fleet, the monstrous ships bearing down on them. The Tarkari's tactic was typical: overwhelm with numbers, strike hard and fast. But humanity had something they didn't: cunning. The Tarkari didn't know how humans fought, how they adapted, and now they were about to find out. The Pride of Earth jinked to the side, narrowly avoiding a Tarkari missile that streaked past in a blur of light. The ship's secondary batteries opened fire, sending a barrage of high-explosive shells into the enemy ships. On the viewports, the first Tarkari destroyer exploded into a brilliant ball of fire. "First blood to us," Lieutenant Dunn called, but her voice was tense. The battle was far from over. Ward gripped the armrests of his chair, watching as his fleet opened fire with terrifying precision. Titan's Vengeance led the charge, its massive cannons unleashing devastation on the Tarkari battle cruisers, tearing holes in their defensive shields. The Tarkari retaliated with volleys of energy pulses, but the human ships were too quick, too unpredictable. They danced through the battlefield, evading the shots, while systematically dismantling the enemy's formations. "We've got incoming dropships," the comms officer shouted. Ward's heart pounded in his chest. The Tarkari were attempting to land troops. They knew the human fleet was deadly, but they were counting on overwhelming them with sheer force on the ground. "Hold the line," Ward ordered, his voice ironclad. "We'll give them no quarter." Human fighters darted through space, harassing the dropships as they neared the battlefield, cutting through Tarkari lines like knives through butter. As the Pride of Earth tore into the nearest Tarkari cruiser, the other ships of the human fleet followed suit, launching their own devastating assaults. Plasma bolts and missiles streaked across space, cutting down Tarkari vessels one by one. For every human ship that took a hit, another retaliated twice as fiercely. In the distance, a Tarkari dreadnought loomed, a massive, terrifying presence. It was the largest ship in their fleet, bristling with weapons and armor, and it was bearing down on the human fleet with relentless precision. But it would not be enough. "Target that dreadnought," Ward ordered. "Concentrate fire on its weak points." Titan's Vengeance fired, followed by the rest of the fleet. A concentrated barrage of weapons slammed into the dreadnought's exposed side, creating cracks in its defenses. The enemy ship shuddered under the assault, and in a moment of weakness, the Pride of Earth launched a final salvo. The dreadnought exploded, disintegrating in a fiery burst that lit up the entire battlefield. For a moment, the Tsark carry faltered. The tide was shifting. Humanity was no longer on the defensive. Ward's voice rang out, calm but full of command. "Push forward, people. This is just the beginning." The Tsark carry had underestimated humanity, and now they were learning the cost of that mistake. The battlefield was a cacophony of fire and chaos. In the cold depths of space, the remnants of the Tsark carry fleet were beginning to crack under the pressure of humanity's counterattack. Tsark carry ships, once considered invincible, now floundered in a disjointed retreat. The Pride of Earth had struck deep into their ranks, tearing apart their battle cruisers, while the mighty Titan's Vengeance kept pounding their largest dreadnoughts into oblivion. Yet, despite their crumbling offensive, the Tsark carry were not backing down. Their forces might have been shattered, but their desperation was palpable. The battle was far from won. "Captain, we've got more incoming." Lieutenant Dunn called, her voice tense. Ward's heart sank. Their initial victory was an illusion. The Tsark carry were regrouping, and they were far from beaten. The human fleet had been efficient, but they hadn't expected such a relentless counter-push from the invaders. "What are we looking at?" Ward demanded, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the screens. The sensors were picking up more enemy ships, this time smaller, faster vessels darting into the fray. "They're sending reinforcements." Dunn's fingers flew across her console. "Not reinforcements, Captain. A new tactic. They're launching suicide attacks. Drones, long-range missiles, anything they can throw at us. The Tsark carry are desperate." Ward's mind raced. The Tsark carry might have been ruthless, but they were also calculating. Their move to turn the tide of battle through sheer desperation made sense in a twisted way. If they could disable key ships, take out the flagship Titan's Vengeance, the entire human fleet could collapse. "All hands, brace for impact," Ward shouted. The first wave of Tsark carry missiles launched in a deadly barrage, their warheads screaming through space, leaving streaks of light in their wake. The Pride of Earth jerked as a blast hit its shields, sending a violent tremor through the ship. Sparks flew from a nearby console, and the ship's alarms blared. "Shields holding, but they're weakening," Dunn reported. Ward gritted his teeth. He had no intention of losing the Pride of Earth. Not now, not after everything they'd been through. The Tsark carry were relentless, but the humans were proving themselves more resilient than they had ever expected. "Redirect energy to the forward shields," Ward ordered. "We need to protect our front lines. Engage those drones before they hit anything critical." The bridge crew worked frantically, coordinating with the fleet's defensive systems, sending every last ounce of power to the front lines. But the Tsark carry were too numerous, too fast. The battle had shifted from a confrontation of pure firepower to one of attrition, where each side was trying to outlast the other. The first wave of Tsark carry drones closed in, their high-pitched screeching filling the comm system as they cut through space. Human interceptors launched from the hangars, their engines flaring as they tore into the enemy swarm. A flurry of explosions erupted in space as drones were obliterated one by one, but the sheer number of them made it impossible to take them all down in time. "Captain," the comms officer called. "We've got a transmission from Admiral Calloway. He's demanding an update." Ward didn't hesitate. "Patch it through." The screen flickered, and the weathered face of Admiral Calloway appeared, his eyes sharp despite the obvious strain on his face. "Captain, we've lost several ships. The Tsark carry are more dangerous than we anticipated. They're adapting to our tactics." "We've noticed, Admiral," Ward replied, his voice firm. "They're deploying drones, suicide missiles, all of it. It's overwhelming us. We can't keep up this pace." Calloway's gaze hardened, and his lips pressed into a thin line. "Hold steady, Captain. We've got something they haven't seen yet. Our engineers have developed a new weapon, a prototype that can take out multiple ships in one shot. We'll need you to hold them off until we're in position to deploy it. Ward's stomach churned. The pressure was mounting, but the Admiral's plan gave him something to hold on to. How long? 10 minutes, Calloway said, his voice clipped. Do what you can. The line went dead. 10 minutes. It felt like a lifetime. Ward turned toward Dunn. Can we hold them for 10 minutes? She didn't flinch. We can, Captain, but we need to keep the pressure on. If they get the upper hand, if they sense weakness, they'll exploit it. Ward gritted his teeth and leaned forward. Then let's make sure they never get that chance. As the crew continued their frantic efforts to maintain the pride of Earth's defensive capabilities, Ward looked out at the battle unfolding in front of him. The Tarkari were trying to break through, but the human fleet wasn't backing down. The Pride of Earth maneuvered with precision, its guns roaring back at the oncoming drones, fighters weaving in and out of enemy formations. One of the Tarkari ships, a massive destroyer, locked onto their position, its deadly weapons primed for a direct hit. A volley of plasma shots struck the human fleet's rear ships, shattering their defenses and sending debris spiraling out into space. But the human fleet retaliated just as fiercely. A salvo of missiles launched from a nearby human cruiser, impacting the Tarkari destroyer with the force of 1,000 suns. The enemy ship lurched, losing power as its hull cracked open under the assault. Another Tarkari cruiser, more agile than the rest, broke through the firestorm, moving straight for the Titan's vengeance. The flagship's shields flickered as the first round of fire from the smaller enemy vessel slammed into its side. Target the cruiser, Ward ordered immediately. All ships, concentrate fire on that one. Human ships swarmed the enemy vessel, unloading everything they had. Energy beams, missiles, and railgun slugs streaked through space, connecting with the cruiser's weak points. The ship shuddered violently before exploding in a burst of light. Ward watched, the weight of the battle bearing down on him. Time was running out. 10 minutes, people, Ward called, his voice like steel. We've got 10 minutes to finish this. As the battle raged on, humanity's resolve hardened. They weren't going to lose. Not today. Not when they had this much at stake. And as the enemy pressed harder, humanity's defiance burned brighter. The Tarkari would learn. Underestimating humanity had been their gravest mistake. The seconds seemed to stretch into eternity. The battle raged on around the Pride of Earth as its crew fought tooth and nail to keep the Tarkari at bay. Ward's pulse thrummed in his veins. Every order he gave, every movement on the bridge felt critical. The Tarkari weren't just fighting for victory. They were fighting for total annihilation. The enemy fleet, though battered, continued to push forward. The drones, the bombers, the frigates, all of it came in waves. The human forces were holding their own, but the numbers were starting to overwhelm them. The Titan's Vengeance and other heavy cruisers were engaging in brutal close-quarter combat, their weapons delivering devastating strikes, but they were taking hits in return. Captain, Dunn's voice rang out. The Tarkari flagship is coming into range. They're deploying their final wave. It's now or never. Ward's eyes locked onto the screen in front of him. There, looming in the distance, was the Tarkari flagship, its monstrous form black against the backdrop of the stars. Its weapons crackled with energy, the last of their offensive capabilities. It was clear now. The Tarkari were preparing to unleash everything they had left. This was their last desperate attempt to end the war in their favor. Ward didn't hesitate. All ships, focus fire on that flagship. We need to bring it down before it hits us with everything it has. A flurry of orders erupted across the bridge. The human fleet responded immediately, every ship coordinating to target the Tarkari flagship. Plasma cannons and mass drivers launched a deadly barrage, streaking toward their target. The Tarkari flagship retaliated with its own burst of energy fire, illuminating the darkened expanse of space. The sheer power of their weapons rattled the Pride of Earth, but the ship held strong. Captain, the prototype is ready. came the voice of the weapons officer. "We can launch the weapon now." Ward's breath caught in his throat. The prototype, humanity's secret weapon, a devastating energy beam that had the potential to obliterate a ship with a single shot. But it came with a price. The weapon was unstable, and its use would push their systems to the brink. There was no room for error. "Do it," Ward commanded. "Now." The weapons officer hit a series of keys, and the entire ship seemed to hum with power. A brilliant beam of concentrated energy shot from the Pride of Earth, its intensity blinding as it streaked toward the Tarkari flagship. For a moment, time itself seemed to slow as the beam connected with the enemy ship. There was a deafening silence, followed by a colossal explosion. The flagship shuddered, its massive form racked by violent convulsions. The energy beam had pierced through its shields, striking the heart of the ship with surgical precision. The Tarkari flagship, once a symbol of their might, now burned in space, its once imposing frame crumbling into fiery debris. Ward watched in awe as the flagship was consumed by the explosion. The Tarkari flagship had been destroyed. The first major victory for humanity had just been achieved, but it came at a tremendous cost. The crew of the Pride of Earth let out a collective cheer, but Ward's heart remained heavy. He knew better than to celebrate too soon. The Tarkari were not the type to admit defeat. This was just one battle, and the war was far from over. "Don't get cocky, people," Ward barked. "That flagship is down, but there's still a whole damned fleet out there. We finish this now. We finish it together." With that, the human fleet pushed forward with renewed vigor. The destruction of the flagship had thrown the Tarkari into disarray. Ships scattered in all directions, trying to regroup, trying to flee. But it was too late. The human fleet was already on top of them, picking off their remaining ships with ruthless efficiency. The Pride of Earth was in the thick of it, weaving through enemy vessels, using its agility to outmaneuver the Tarkari's larger, more cumbersome ships. Its weapons fired relentlessly, each shot tearing through enemy hulls, sending Tarkari warships into fiery destruction. Dunn called out from her station. "Captain, we've got enemy reinforcements coming from behind the asteroid belt. Another wave of Tarkari warships. Big ones." Ward gritted his teeth. "Not enough. We've got them on the run. Rear flank, prepare for an ambush." The human fleet reoriented, focusing on the incoming reinforcements, but now they had the upper hand. The Tarkari were disorganized, their ships already damaged, and they were being torn apart in their attempt to regroup. One by one, the Tarkari vessels fell. Another destroyer exploded in a fiery burst. A cruiser was torn apart by concentrated fire from 3 human ships. The tide had turned completely. "Captain," Dunn shouted, a grin on her face. "It's happening. We're pushing them back. They're breaking apart." Ward felt a surge of adrenaline. They had done it. Against all odds, humanity was winning. The Tarkari were being routed, their forces scattered across the battlefield, their once mighty fleet in shambles. The humans had struck back harder than the invaders had ever expected. But even as victory loomed large, Ward knew there was more work to be done. This battle may have been won, but the war, no matter how many ships they destroyed, was still in full force. "We're not done yet," Ward muttered under his breath. "We push until they're gone." As the final remnants of the Tarkari fleet began to crumble, humanity's message was clear. Earth was not to be trifled with. The Tarkari had fought them weak, fought them easy prey. But now, they knew the truth. Humanity was not just a survivor. They were a force to be reckoned with. The void of space had turned into a battlefield littered with wreckage. The debris from shattered Tarkari ships drifted silently in the cold expanse, and the once dominant invaders' fleet had been broken, its remains scattered across the stars. The Pride of Earth hung at the center of the chaos, its hull pockmarked from the battle, but still operational, still defiant. Ward stood at the helm, his eyes scanning the broken remnants of the enemy fleet. The exhilaration of victory was there, but it was tainted by the reality of the cost. Thousands of lives had been lost, and the damage to the human fleet was severe. It was not an easy win, not by any stretch of the imagination. And though the Tark carry had been driven back, Ward knew they wouldn't stay down for long. "Captain," Dunn's voice pulled him out of his thoughts. "We've lost contact with the Rising Star. It was part of the rear flank during the last push, and they haven't checked in. I sent a distress signal, but no response." Ward's jaw tightened. Another ship gone. The Rising Star wasn't a large vessel, but its crew was made up of some of the best pilots humanity had to offer. Losing it, especially now, felt like a cruel reminder that no victory came without sacrifice. "I'll authorize a recovery operation," Ward said. "Prepare a team, Lieutenant. If we can salvage anything that might give us an edge, it could help." A pause. "Aye, Captain. I'll get right on it." "Good," Ward replied, his voice heavy with weariness. He watched the destruction outside the bridge windows, the remnants of Tark carry ships drifting like ghost ships in the aftermath. He had been fighting for days straight, his mind running on fumes. But now, there was a moment of respite, however brief it might be. The war wasn't over, but humanity had made its statement. The Tark carry had miscalculated. He turned to face his crew, taking a moment to gauge their exhaustion. His officers were battle-hardened, but the constant strain was taking its toll. They had been under fire for what felt like weeks, their survival a constant balancing act between hope and desperation. And even though the tides had shifted, there was still an overwhelming sense of unease. The Tark carry were regrouping. Ward knew it wouldn't take them long. They were a brutal, resilient species, proud, strategic, and not easily cowed. The recent defeat would sting, but the real test would be how they responded. "Admiral Calloway," Ward said, pressing a button on his console. A moment later, the aged face of the Admiral appeared on the screen. "Captain Ward, I trust you're still breathing." Calloway's voice was a raspy chuckle, but there was something in it that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Barely," Ward replied, "but we held our ground. We took out their flagship. The fleet's scattered, but we've lost too many ships. And the Rising Star, it's unresponsive." Calloway's expression darkened. "That's a heavy blow. We knew there would be casualties, but every ship counts. Keep your eyes sharp, Captain. I don't need to remind you that the Tark carry won't back down easily. The war may not be over yet." "I know, sir," Ward responded grimly, "but we got to capitalize on the momentum. They're disorganized. We have to hit them hard while they're still reeling from this defeat." "I agree," Calloway said, his voice cold. "That's why I've ordered a deep reconnaissance mission. We need to find their remaining command structures. We don't just need to beat them in battle. We need to decapitate their leadership. If we do that, they'll collapse." Ward nodded, his mind already running through the tactical scenarios. If they could take out the Tark carry command infrastructure, the rest of the fleet would likely fall apart. But even that had risks. The Tark carry were cunning. They would protect their leadership at all costs. "The Vengeance is still operational," Ward said, referring to the flagship. "We can lead the charge in that mission." "Good," Calloway replied. "But Ward, be careful. The next phase of this war won't be like the last. Expect them to come at you with everything they have. This was a setback, not a defeat." "Understood, Admiral. We're ready," Ward answered, pride of Earth out. The screen flickered off, and Ward took a long, steadying breath. The reality of the mission ahead weighed heavily on him. Decapitating the Tark carry's leadership was the key to ending this war, but it would come with its own set of dangers. As he turned to face his crew, the silence in the room was deafening. Everyone knew what was at stake. The fleet had already endured so much, and now they had to find the strength to push forward. They couldn't afford to rest. Not now. "Prepare for a long haul, people," Ward said, his voice steady despite the fatigue pulling at him. "We're heading into the heart of enemy territory. It won't be easy, but it's the only way to end this." Dunn stood tall, determination in her eyes. "We're with you, Captain." Ward nodded. "Then let's get to work." The crew began to move with purpose. The pride of Earth might have been battered, but it wasn't broken. Humanity was standing tall once again, and the Tsarkari would soon learn that they had woken a force they couldn't control. The next phase of the war was about to begin, and humanity was ready to finish it. The cold vastness of space stretched out before the pride of Earth as it entered the Tsarkari stronghold zone. It was a region untouched by human hands, a realm where Tsarkari warships moved with ruthless efficiency, constantly patrolling and scanning the periphery for any signs of weakness. Yet now, it felt different. There was a gnawing tension in the air, a weight of finality. They had won the battle, but the war would not be decided on the field of combat alone. It would be won in the heart of the Tsarkari's own domain. Captain Ward stood in front of the bridge's viewport, watching as the remains of the enemy fleet drifted into the distance. It had been a brutal series of battles, but humanity had proven itself more than capable of holding its own. Still, the scars of the fight lingered, on the ships, on the men and women aboard, and in the weary expressions of the crew. "Captain," Dunn's voice broke through his thoughts, "we've entered their core territory. Enemy ships are being detected on all frequencies. The Tsarkari aren't giving up." Ward turned, facing his lieutenant. "How many are we looking at?" "Hard to say, sir," she replied, tapping rapidly at her console. "A dozen large ships, several smaller ones, and possibly more hidden in the asteroid field. We're in a lion's den now." The weight of her words hit him like a hammer. This was the heart of Tsarkari space, their command structure, their strategic centers. To hit it now was to ensure their defeat. If they succeeded, the Tsarkari would collapse. But if they failed, they risked everything. Ward's mind raced, calculating their chances, but one thing remained clear: there was no turning back. They had come too far to pull out now. The Tsarkari had underestimated humanity's resolve, but Ward knew they would stop at nothing to reclaim their lost ground. This was their last stand, and humanity had no choice but to meet them head-on. "All ships, prepare to engage," Ward ordered, his voice firm. "We're not just fighting for survival anymore. We're fighting for the future of our people." The crew moved with practiced efficiency. The pride of Earth's weapon systems came online. Its shields flared to life, and the ship's engines roared as it accelerated toward the enemy fleet. Around them, the rest of the human fleet followed suit, each vessel poised for the final confrontation. Within minutes, the first Tsarkari warship appeared on the radar, a colossal dreadnought. It was followed by another, then another. The Tsarkari were bringing everything they had. Ward's pulse quickened, but he remained calm. "Target the dreadnoughts first," he commanded. "We need to cripple their flagship capabilities. Focus all fire on the lead ship." As the human fleet closed in, the first volley of fire erupted. Plasma cannons, missile barrages, and railgun slugs tore through space, slamming into the Tsarkari dreadnoughts with thunderous force. But the Tsarkari weren't about to go down without a fight. Their ships retaliated, their energy shields flaring brightly as they unleashed devastating beams of their own. The pride of Earth rocked under the onslaught, its shields absorbing most of the damage, but the tremors running deep through the hull. "Shields at 65%, Captain," reported the tactical officer. "We're holding, but not for long." "We can't let up," Ward said, his voice tight. "Keep pushing. Concentrate fire on their engines." The pride of Earth's weapons system responded immediately. A barrage of railgun shots streaked through the dark void, striking the Tsarkari dreadnought's engines. The ship shuddered violently as its propulsion systems were crippled. The mighty warship, once a symbol of invulnerability, was now helpless. Ward's heart pounded in his chest. Victory was within their grasp, but it wasn't over yet. The Tsarkari were relentless. Their ships circled, weaving in and out of the firestorm, trying to outmaneuver the human fleet. The pride of Earth's guns continued to fire. sending beams of destruction into the advancing Tarkari ships. But there were more still lurking in the shadows of the asteroid field, waiting for their moment to strike. A loud siren blared through the ship as an incoming missile lock registered on the sensors. Ward barely had time to react. "Brace for impact," he shouted. The ship shook as a Tarkari missile barrage slammed into the Pride of Earth's shields, sending a shockwave through the bridge. Ward's breath caught as the screen blinked red. "We're losing the starboard shields," Dunn yelled. "Redirect power to the starboard side," Ward ordered, his hands gripping the console in front of him. "We can't afford to fall back now." The crew scrambled into action, the Pride of Earth responding with remarkable precision despite the damage. The ship's shields began to recover as the power was redirected, but the Tarkari didn't give them a moment's respite. A final, massive wave of fire surged toward the human fleet, the Tarkari desperate to finish what they had started. But humanity was not finished, not by a long shot. "We're almost there," Ward muttered, his eyes fixed on the swirling mass of enemy ships. "Just a little longer." In that moment, something shifted. The Tarkari flagship, the largest and most menacing of their remaining ships, began to drift toward the Pride of Earth. It had been avoiding direct combat, waiting for an opening to strike a decisive blow. But now, seeing the tide of battle turn, it moved forward to challenge the humans directly. Ward's heart raced as the two ships locked into a deadly dance. The Tarkari flagship fired its main weapon, a massive beam of destructive energy that scorched through the dark expanse, aimed directly at the Pride of Earth. The crew braced for impact. But just before the beam could hit, the Titan's Vengeance, a human battle cruiser, intervened, interposing itself between the Pride of Earth and the incoming fire. The cruiser took the full brunt of the Tarkari's blast, its shields flaring bright before cracking under the pressure. The ship lurched violently, but it had done its job. It had bought the Pride of Earth enough time to retaliate. With a roar, Ward ordered the final strike. "All ships, focus fire on their flagship. Now." The combined might of the human fleet came crashing down on the Tarkari flagship. A final decisive volley struck the heart of the enemy ship, tearing through its defenses and setting off a cataclysmic explosion. The flagship burned, its core imploding in a burst of light. For a moment, there was silence. Then the human fleet erupted in cheers, the sound of victory echoing across the comms. The Tarkari were finished. Ward stood tall, his eyes staring out at the fiery remnants of the battle. The war was over. Humanity had done the impossible. They had beaten back the invaders. They had shown the universe that humanity was not weak. They were strong, and they would never back down. The dawn of a new era had begun.